Thank you for tuning in. We're on our manhood journey, and our topic for this volume is called Man and His Idols. Brian will introduce us to the framework of idolatry today. We can't wait to hear what he has to share with us. Over to you, Brian.
Welcome, guys, to Volume 3 of 33, the series. This volume is called A Man and His Traps. And over the next 6 sessions, we're going to look deep into the heart of a man, explore some areas that are all too easy to ignore, but are critical to who we are as men. Guys, too many men have let temptation and traps neutralize their effectiveness as men. Too many guys have wrecked their own lives and the lives of those around them. Too many of us are living in shame, in guilt, and in hiding. Whether it's obvious issues like adultery, pornography, and excessive financial debt, or the hidden issues like the desperate need for approval, disappointment with life, and the fear of failure. Guys, in this volume, we are going to stare these temptations right in the face. We're going to deal with and understand the choices that we make that hinder our experience of the abundant life that we were created to live. The life of true fulfillment promised by the Bible for those who live in the grace offered by Jesus Christ. We're going to understand and deal with why we would ever willfully choose something other than God's best for our lives. Now, in today's session, we want to do 2 things. First, we're going to present some key realities that are foundational for this entire volume. As we talk about the noble fight against traps and temptations, there are some basic concepts that we must understand. After we talk about these key realities, the second thing we want to do is to provide you with a framework for understanding temptation in the life of a man. Why is it that we struggle with certain issues? Why do we keep making the same bad decision over and over again? We want to give you a biblical grid that will help you understand what is actually driving your struggles. We're going to help you get to the root issue, the sin beneath the sin. So let's get started. Tierce is going to introduce us to 4 key realities that are going to guide us through this volume. If you've experienced volumes 1 or 2 of 33, you'll recognize some of these. If you haven't, and you want to dive deeper into these issues, I'd like to encourage you to check out those sessions. We want to review them here because they are essential for dealing with temptation in the life of a man.
All right, guys, here's the first key reality. Ruthless honesty. Ruthless honesty. In order to experience ultimate freedom, you've got to be willing to pursue ruthless honesty in the company of trustworthy men. You know, a lot of us are just pretending that we have it all together. We go through life as if we were wearing a mask, just trying to cover up our imperfections. We pretend like life is great or struggle-free. For some guys, their lives are out of control or filled with anxiety, but they pretend like everything's okay. We pretend like we've got it all together, believing the lie that we are defined by our performance. Here's how author David White puts it. All of us live in fear of exposure. We don't want the worst things about us to be known. We posture and wear masks. We establish elaborate facades and hide behind our good deeds. This refusal to be truly known and exposed keeps us stuck in our sin. And the hard truth is this. Guys, you're a mess and I'm a mess. What's tempting you tempts me, and it tempts every man in one form or another. That mythical guy whose life appears to be morally perfect, well, he doesn't really exist. So let's stop pretending and pursue ruthless honesty with other men. This must become a way of life for us in our journey toward authentic manhood. We've got to share our struggles with trustworthy men because on this side of heaven, we'll never cease to struggle. And that's our second key reality. Struggle and temptation. Struggle and temptation. There's no such thing as a life apart from struggle and temptation. In fact, do you know what you call a life apart from sin? Well, that would be heaven. But for now, we are broken men living in a broken world. Because of Adam's sin, our hearts have been corrupted, and our default mode, apart from Christ, is to have an unhealthy desire for the things of this world. The Bible tells us that apart from a relationship with Jesus, our natural tendency is not only to fall into temptation's traps, but that we'll actually run after them. We'll cultivate them, and eventually we'll even worship them. And even if we've already chosen to follow Christ, well, we still face this tension in our desires. The Apostle Paul addressed this in his letter to the Galatians. He said, "The desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things you want to do." Hey guys, if we're honest, I think we would admit that all of us have felt that. We have all chosen to do something that we know we shouldn't have done, something that distracts us from our highest purpose. This is a reality that every man must deal with during his time on planet Earth. As one author described it, we are either battling sin, actively sinning, or we are in the aftermath of sin. And that's why we need to remember the third key reality for this volume. It can be summed up in one word. That word is grace. It's the idea of a free gift, something given to you apart from anything you've done. If you've chosen to follow Jesus, then you've received God's free gift of salvation and forgiveness. Regardless of your performance, good or bad, you cannot lose or get more of this gift. Now, unfortunately, too many of us often act like Jesus only paid the price for our past sins. And after that, well, it's up to us. We think we get in by grace, but we act like we stay in by self-effort. But guys, it's all grace. And how we respond when we stumble reveals if we've truly embraced this reality. Matt Chandler describes it this way. He says, "The marker of those who understand the gospel of Jesus Christ is that when they stumble and fall, when they screw up, they run to God and not from Him, because they clearly understand that their acceptance before God is not predicated upon their behavior, but on the righteous life of Jesus Christ and His sacrificial death." In everything we talk about in this volume, grace is at the core. That's because you're going to mess up. You'll mess up in the days or weeks between watching these sessions. But remember, Jesus has already paid the price for your mistakes, past, present, and future. So, when you fall, run toward God and His grace, not away from Him. Now, here's our fourth and final key reality. 2 words. Heart change. Heart change. Authentic manhood is primarily about heart change. The noble fight against sin and temptation is not just about behavior modification. Our primary goal is not merely to get you to stop doing certain behaviors. Jesus ultimately wants our heart. He doesn't just want us to stop lying. He wants us to love the truth. He doesn't just want us to be free from materialism. He wants us to love generosity. Behavior modification without heart change is dangerous because it looks like holiness, but it only hides the deeper issues. And that's why in this volume, we're not only going to examine specific behaviors and external issues, I mean, we're going to do that, but we're also going to look at the deep motivations in our heart. Those motivations that are driving us towards certain actions and attitudes and activities. Those manhood traps.
This framework is going to give us a new perspective that will help us move beyond just changing external behavior and will help us get underneath the surface of our deep internal desires, our heart. This framework will set us up to do just that, to understand struggles at a heart level. The Bible says that all wrong behavior ultimately goes back to a heart problem. And do you know how the Bible describes this heart problem? It uses one word, idolatry. Idolatry is when we allow anything other than God to become the center of our hearts. True happiness, contentment, meaning, identity, purpose, or security. It's when we allow something else to become an idol or a surrogate God in our lives, ruling our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. All of us are worshipers. You see, we all worship something or someone. The question becomes who or what it is that we worship. All of our sin, all of our idolatry, ultimately is a result of our hearts seeking happiness in something other than God. It's a problem that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve's sin in Genesis 3 wasn't merely their outward behavior, that they ate a particular fruit. They sought happiness outside of God and his designated pathway. They bought into Satan's lie that God was holding out on them and that they needed something outside of God and his provision to be happy. Pastor Tim Keller summarizes idolatry this way. He says, idolatry is always the reason we ever do anything wrong. Why do we ever lie or fail to love or keep promises or live unselfishly? The specific answer is always that there is something besides Jesus Christ that you feel you must have to be happy. Something that is more important to your heart than God. The secret to change is to always identify the idols of the heart. So, as we think about sin, traps, temptation, and common manhood struggles in this volume, we have to get beyond just external behavior and understand the biblical framework of idolatry and idols. Just like we do in other volumes of 33, we are going to journey into places most men have never journeyed. As we unpack this framework of idolatry, there are a few things that you need to know about idols that will help set it up. First, an idol can be anything, even a good thing. We can make an idol out of money or sex or religion, relationship, our family, our performance, material possessions, knowledge, a sports team, our career, alcohol, drugs, food, physical fitness, clothes, a political party, or even a social cause. An idol is anything that competes with God for our heart's affections. Or, as Pastor Martin Lloyd-Jones has said, an idol is usually whatever rouses and attracts me so easily that I give my time, my attention, my energy, and my money to it effortlessly. The second thing you need to know is that idolatry is built on a lie. Idols dupe us. They promise us happiness, but they only bring diminishing returns and eventually enslavement. They always overpromise and underdeliver. They always fail to bring lasting rest or refreshment. That vacation never feels long enough. That higher income doesn't buy enough. That special person eventually disappoints. The alcohol, pornography, or the downtime doesn't provide the escape you hoped for. The smell of that new car wears off. Idols always disappoint and enslave. Here's a third thing you need to know about idols. They come from legitimate desires that are being expressed in inordinate or inappropriate ways. God created many things for our pleasure and enjoyment. For instance, food and sex are God's good gift to humanity, but he has given us noble ways of enjoying them. What's wrong is to misuse them, worship them, to pursue them outside of God's purpose for them. When you schedule your existence around something, hide your consumption of them from others, or make them your favorite source of comfort, that's when they cross the line. Here's the final thing that helps set up our framework, and that is to organize idols into two categories, or what Pastor Tim Keller calls surface idols and deep idols. Surface idols tend to be obvious, like the top part of a big iceberg that is sticking up above the surface of the ocean. They're easily recognizable in a person's life. They're usually directly related to some external behavior. We've mentioned many of them already, like work, sex, food, or money. Deep idols, on the other hand, like the mammon underside of an iceberg, which actually accounts for most of its mass, refer to the core desires below the surface, the ones that rule our hearts and are the motivating voices behind our surface idols and external behaviors. If surface idols and external behavior are the branches, then the deep idols are the roots. And if you are ever going to make lasting change in your life, you always have to get to the root. As we introduce these three deep idols to you, you'll come to see that it is the deep idols that lie at the root of every manhood struggle. It's these deep idols that cause the manhood traps that can ultimately devour us. So here they are. We call them the deep idols of control, significance, and comfort. Let's unpack each of these in a little more detail. Look at the core lies they tell us and identify their typical characteristics. The first deep idol we'll talk about is control. Now remember, all idols come with a lie. If control is one of your deep idols, you are believing this fundamental lie. If I can just maintain influence or mastery over this situation, these people, my performance, my schedule, my income, or whatever, then I'll be okay, content, strong, and safe. But here's the biblical reality. You're not in control. You never have been and never will be. The Bible tells us that the only person in control is God. Proverbs 19:21 declares, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." Now, what are some of the typical characteristics of the deep idol of control? If your idol is control, then your functional heaven is having certainty or dominance, while your biggest fear is instability or weakness. One way it often plays itself out in a man's life is through the relentless pursuit of security, whether it's financial, vocational, or relational security. If this is your tendency, then you probably experience a lot of worry and anxiety. You might fixate on questions like, what if I lose my job? Or will I ever have enough money? You're always projecting into the future, hypothetical scenarios, and how they may unravel your life. Maybe you've experienced panic attacks or insomnia. And to cope with this anxiety, perhaps you've created an overdependence on alcohol or caffeine, a spouse, parent, or friend. Another way a deep idol of control can play itself out in a man's life is through an excessive pursuit of power. If this is you, then you always have to be in charge. You probably overly enjoy excessive influence over people and situations. You always have to captain the ship. You don't just want people's respect. You want them to know and experience you as a man of consequence. You are probably tempted to use people and situations to your advantage. And people can get the feeling around you that they are just objects or pawns. The next deep idol is significance. Significance tells you this lie. If this person this social group, the colleagues in my profession, if they find me worthy of attention or love, if they acknowledge my value or greatness, as long as I am not being disgraced before them, then I'll be worthy, important, and acceptable. But what does the Bible tell us? Galatians 1:10 says that if we're just trying to please man, we're not being a servant of Christ. Colossians 3:23 says that we should be living to please the Lord, not man. You see, the Bible tells us that finding our worth, value, or acceptance in the eyes of others will eventually lead to failure or disappointment. What are some of the typical characteristics of the deep idol of significance? If your idol is significance, then your functional heaven is affirmation, while your biggest fear is rejection or humiliation. This idol often plays itself out in your life as an overwhelming need for approval or love. If this is you, you're always seeking to please. You can't stand if someone's upset with you. You flee from conflict like it's the plague. Your greatest fear is that you'll let others down. You often beat yourself up for not saying the right thing, and you're overly occupied with doing relational maintenance with all of your friends, associates, and family members. Another way it can surface in a man's life is through an inordinate desire for recognition. If this is you, you want people to validate your greatness. At times, you long to be the center of attention. The world is your stage and people are your audience. You want fame in the eyes of others, whether it's your immediate boss, the board, or your buddies. The final deep idol relates primarily to the desires of the body. We call it the deep idol of comfort. And it tells you this lie: if I can just maintain physical ease or relaxation, if life can just be laid back, if I can just keep away from stress or responsibility, if I can just experience some pleasure or enjoyment in the moment, then life will be more fulfilling, easy, fun, or thrilling. However, the Bible puts the ultimate fountain of pleasure elsewhere. King David wrote the following to God in one of his Psalms: "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures." What are some of the typical characteristics of a deep idol of comfort? If your idol is comfort, then your functional heaven is pleasure and ease, while your biggest fear is boredom and responsibility. An idol of comfort often manifests itself in a man's life through a fear of stress and responsibility. Relaxation and the absence of difficulty have become your end zone. You feel entitled to yet another hunting trip, to another party, to another ball game, club, or concert. It's always your high point. And you may have a tendency to view others as those who make demands on your schedule. From your perspective, the kids and wife are always making requests at the wrong time. You may also have a tendency toward quitting and laziness, which you've conveniently just categorized as being laid back. A comfort idol can also show up in a man's life through constant consumption, whether it's food, social media, relationships, porn, video games, gambling, or whatever. You always have to have something stimulating, entertaining, consoling, or distracting you. It's your go-to. Whenever life gets hard or stressful, you're tempted toward compulsive behavior, whether it's sex, comfort food, or that next big purchase. Your tendency is to indulge first and ask questions later. Control, significance, comfort. You've probably recognized yourself and your tendencies as we've described the typical characteristics of these three deep idols. And guys, isolating the real problem is always one of the first steps to heart change. These three deep idols lurk secretly behind every manhood trap. Every sin, all idolatry, ultimately goes back to a misplaced happiness in one of these areas. And unless you fight sin at its root, By identifying your deep idols, you'll just be trimming weeds that will continue to grow back.
Control, significance, and comfort. This is what we will be hearing about more during the 4 remaining sessions. This volume will help you to identify the idols that you are worshiping. Please remember to invite a friend or a family member to join our next episode. Contact us for more information as well as the details on becoming a partner of this program. God bless you.